Cassation. So, okay. With me today, folks, is Dr. Roz Maiorino and Eleanor Riccardi of Bespoke Italian Citizenship. And we're here to talk today about dual citizenship and some of the issues that have arisen. There's a new law in Italy that's causing some challenges and some other aspects. And the law, Bill 752, is the bill that's on the books right now, and that could have a serious impact on becoming a dual citizen. Is that right?
Yes, the bill has proposed a limitation in generation of 3 years, which might or might not affect a lot of Americans simply because Americans usually go back 3 generations on no more than that. The other 2 requirements on the bill are the big whammies. The second one is a 1-year residency requirement in Italy before you can apply. So that would be devastating. And the third one is a language test. It's a 1B language exam, which is both an oral and a written test before you can qualify for Italian citizenship. Now, those 3 big items are on this bill. It is going through Parliament. If it gets through, it whole or not, or if it gets amended or changed or whatnot, is still waiting to be seen. It is an election year in Italy, so lots of immigration always pops up during this time, and politicians always like to use the platform of immigration for votes. What happens after they get voted in with that bill? We get to see what happens there. But there are some changes that are happening now. And I don't know, you talk about that now, or you want to?
Yeah, let's please talk about that now. I think that's so many people want to become citizens of both the United States and Italy, and so what you mentioned it before was that what's keeping you up at night is the court case. I think it is, and if you can tell us more about that.
So in June of 2023, very recently,
yeah,
the Supreme Court of Italy reinterpreted the citizenship law just randomly. Now, so reinterpretations are different than bills, right? You don't need votes or whatnot, right? They just took the JJS law as we know it, and they said, right now the law indicates if your anchor ancestor who came from Italy came to the United States, had children, and then naturalized to become American, you still qualify. Now, that is a definition that we've known for a long time. That is a definition that we've all used. However, in the Supreme Court in 2023 decided to add a little wrinkle to that by saying, if the next generation born was under the age of 21 at the time of naturalization of the anchor ancestor, you no longer qualify. That's kind of what we call the minor issue. I like to give an example because it just makes it a little easier.
Yeah, please go ahead. Sure.
Let's say your anchor ancestor, John, left Italy, came to New York in 1950. Then John had a son named Anthony. Anthony was then 10 years old when John decided he wanted to become an American citizen, and he became an American citizen. So normally that scenario would qualify you for citizenship. However, since the ruling of June of 2023, because Anthony was only 10 years old at the time of naturalization of his father, nobody after that qualifies. Now that's a devastating ruling.
Yeah, that's big. Yeah,
it's devastating. And what is happening is so confusing, and it's been so confusing that the ministry that defines how the consulates and the embassies should define the law has still not changed it, because now people are suing in the courts in Italy to clarify, like, is this a permanent thing? Was that a one-off thing? Are we doing this all the time? And so if you're in the judicial system because you're a 1948 case and you have to sue in court, you're getting rejected if you have a minor issue. But if you file the same case in a consulate, you would become a citizen. So now there is this huge split between the definition of where you sit. Now, there's lots of lawsuits right now in Italy to try to clarify exactly where the Supreme Court wants to go with this indefinitely. And once the dust settles and they do keep this new interpretation, the ministry will then enforce it. And then suddenly we will lose lots of qualified individuals.
Well, nobody's if you're a dual citizen right now, that's not going to have any effect on you. It's just the people that come in forward. I see. Right.
Yes,
right.
That is exactly correct. They don't grandfather clause you in, or they don't respectively like ever enforce these laws because it's just too difficult to do that. But moving forward, we are walking into muddy waters. Actually, right before we were speaking to somebody else who did have to go to court because they had a maternal case, and there was a question of a minor issue. And I'm like, I got to be honest with you. So far since 2023, everybody with a minor issue has been rejected because the lower courts feel obligated to follow the Supreme Court ruling. Now, the Supreme Court in Italy is super different than the Supreme Court in the US. The judges have huge amount of discretion to enforce the Supreme Court's decision or not, but the lower judges, we've seen again and again since the reinterpretation of the law, have followed it. Now, when people appeal, there has been some success on appeal when they move to an appeal judge versus the lower judge. But it's not great news. And this is the bigger issue, because reinterpretation of law, enforcing of that is in a day versus having a bill to go through the parliament and getting votes and getting modified. That could take a little bit to come in. But reinterpretation of law, similar to what happened with the abortion reinterpretation in the United States after 70 years of us understanding one definition of the law within one ruling, the whole thing kind of turned on its head. And so that's kind of where we are right now with the Italian Supreme Court. They still have not clarified their stance. We're hoping we get clarity. And once there's clarity, then the ministry, which controls the definition of JS in both the consulates and the Italian clerks, then they will decide to have everybody uniformly again define what that means.
Now, in your business, is that your business does that? You will go ahead and process people through the citizenship law to become a dual citizen of Italy and the United States. How's this ruling affected you all now? I mean, with regards to people who are, have their applications pending or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, if there is a minor issue in a judicial case, we are very, very transparent with them. You have to set the expectations up front that, do you want to take steps forward? These are your obstacles. This is what we've seen. And, and some people are like, it's worth it. I'm still going to do it and see where the chips fly. And some of them are like, well, maybe it's not worth it, right? Because it's a 50-50 chance. I mean, it's tough. So it's only in the judicial system. So if you're going through the US consulates or changing your residency and applying in Italy, it still does not affect you. Okay. That pathway still has not changed. And so that's why we always say to everybody, if you have a pathway, don't wait, right? Immigration law always changes constantly. Never for the better, never in the positive direction. I know we always encourage folks, if they have a claim, to pursue it sooner than later, as changes will come, and they are coming. But right now, folks who do have minor issues, we have to be transparent, and it does affect them.
Is there a reason why are they doing this now? I mean, do you all think, what's the reason for it, do you think?
Oh, they hate immigrants. I mean, let's just not sugarcoat what's happening, right? I mean, I think that there's been a shift, not just in Italy, but even in the US, about anti-immigration. And 98% of folks who use the JS process are Brazilians in Italy, and Italians don't like Brazilians. I don't understand it. They're lovely people. I think they're great. I love them. But, the Italians don't like getting their country inundated by Brazilians. There's 30 million Brazilians that qualify for citizenship through this process, and they feel like their country is getting inundated by unwelcome people who don't even speak the language, right? And so because this JS process is in their constitution, they can't just get rid of it, but they most certainly can create obstacles for it, reinterpret it, look at it in a different way. It's just like our Second Amendment rights, right? It's in our constitution. We'll always have it. But if you want to curb that, you'll reinterpret the law or create limitations around that.
Interesting. What now? Are you both dual citizens, or you both have citizenship in the United States and Italy, of course?
Yes.
Okay. Well, how long have you had dual citizenship?
Oh, me since 2020, so quite recently for me. And
What
Eleanor,
about you, Eleanor? How long have you been a dual citizen?
Since 2021.
2021. Now, this is a big thing. I started with Primo. I was just all of a sudden this trend just started happening. So many people wanted to become dual citizens, and it's just been ongoing ever since.
it's very popular post-pandemic. I think we all woke up to the fact that having a second passport helps us travel during a pandemic. So something we did not have. I think the political unrest in the US has also caused a lot of folks wanting to have a different location of living if they wanted to. And then those two sort of combined with the fact that the U.S. Italian consulates were closed for 2 years during the pandemic, and the backlog that created with the increased demand, it's caused a huge gridlock right now.
Yeah.
All of the U.S. consulates.
Now, in my case, for instance, I don't know if I could become a citizen because my grandfather, he immigrated here from Italy, turn of the century, and he died in 1947, which is almost more than 20 years after I was born. So basically, would I be qualified to become a dual citizen?
Did he ever naturalize to become American?
I believe he did, but that might have been back before World War II, maybe in the early 1930s. Since he died before I was born, my assumption was that I could.
No, it's got nothing to do with his death. But was your father born after he naturalized?
I believe he was, yeah.
After he was naturalized or before he was naturalized? So this is the question, because that's what makes you qualified. So if your grandfather came over, gave birth to your father, and then naturalized, you qualify.
Oh, okay. So I think he was naturalized before my father was born. My father was the youngest in his family, and he was born 1922.
So your father was born in 1922, and you think your grandfather naturalized in 1920s or 1918?
Probably even before that, I would think. Yeah, because he worked. He worked for he got a job working for the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. That was a big deal for him back then. So I think he probably wanted to be a citizen before he did that, I would think.
Okay, so if he did become a citizen prior to 1922, which is the birth of your father, you do not qualify.
Yeah, how about that? Okay. So it's got to be.
We can always check on that for you. If you can get me some names and dates, I'd be more than happy to qualify you. But is that your only pathway to Italy? Do you also have a grandmother, or on the other side of your family, do you have any Italians that had immigrated?
Well, both my grandparents died about 20 to 25 years before I was born. So, it was a long time. I didn't know them, of course. I just saw them in photographs pretty much. So I really didn't know them. My grandmother came from Avellino. My grandfather came from Salerno, and they met here in the United States. And they got married and stuff. And my father was the youngest of his family. So he was the youngest of 5. And so I'm the youngest of 7. So you can see how the generations are pretty much tied together, but loosely, basically. So I'm not sure if when she came here when she was very young, she was like 2 or 3 years old. And my grandfather came here when he was more like a teenager, a young teenager, I think. And so I think she became a citizen before he did.
That makes sense. Yeah. So that would close that route right away. So your whole qualification hinges upon the date of his naturalization in relation to the birthday of your father.
Interesting. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting looking back on that too. I'm not sure if he went through I know that at one point in time the states took care of immigration. Am I right about that? At one point in time the states did it, and then it became a federal.
Yes, that's exactly right. So a lot of the naturalization documentations can be found in local courts, versus, of course, the federal government, USCIS, also has copies of every single naturalization documentation from every state. But one of the fastest ways of ascertaining naturalization documentation is going to the courthouse or the court in the state in which they naturalized in. So,
And you can do that for people, right? You and Eleanor can do that for people. Wow, that must be some. Yeah. How complicated is that to do that? I mean, that would it sounds complicated because you have to dig in those records.
To qualify people, it's not necessarily that difficult. Sometimes we can find it in about 15, 20 minutes. Other times it can take a few days, just depending on how available the information is and what state that they had resided in at the time of naturalization. Some states are easier than others. New York is notoriously difficult for everything. For any type of documentation, birth, death, marriage, naturalization, anything, it's notoriously difficult. And the documents are kept under lock and key. So a lot of times we don't have visibility to them as well. And so that's what makes it a little bit more challenging with the naturalization for New Yorkers, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible.
But the process, Eleanor will tell you, it's complicated to ascertain documentation, especially these historic documents. Sometimes can be tricky to get a hold of, especially if you're in a place like Pennsylvania, because a lot of these folks came over from Italy and were mining. And then those mining towns don't even exist anymore. They're gone. And so, it can become really challenging. On the flip side, some states like Ohio is there is not that hard to get a hold of documentation. So as Eleanor aptly pointed out, it really is state dependent. But this is what Eleanor does. I mean, she, as you know, is stationed in Boston, and she does what we refer to as tour the East Coast, and she hits every single state and try to dislodge those really difficult documents that sometimes are hard to get.
You have to dig through hard copy, I guess, or is it a lot of the stuff on the computer at least? That'll make it easier for you, or what's?
So you always do need long form original documents, and depending on certified original documents, and just depending. So original meaning the certified documents, not the original when they were issued, and so it really depends on which route that you decide to pursue, as far as what type of documentation you need and what the issue dates need to be. And so we always encourage people to figure out what is the path that they would prefer to take, whether it be litigation, consulate route, or changing their residency, because that is going to determine the actual documentation that they do need. And also every single consulate and every single route, even all of the routes are going to want something different. The judges in Italy, the clerks in Italy. So it's really good to work really closely with your service provider to find out exactly what it is that you're going to need for your process. But choosing your process first is going to be imperative. And we are always happy to talk to people about what those paths might be, because a lot of people just aren't quite sure about what they're eligible for.
Yeah, it's a mystery for me too. People will ask me sometimes on the phone about what their eligibility is, and I just don't know half the time because like you said, it's just you don't know where their families. They the families came here to the United States, but they were all over the place, and sometimes they came to other different parts of South America or Central America, and the naturalization cutoff could impact that as well. So that it can be very, very trying, I think, to figure out what status of the person is.
Yeah, I mean, it gets really tricky. Like, for example, in your case, Ruby, you could probably, let's just say you did qualify. Let's say that the naturalization date was after the birthday of your father, and you would qualify. The next step for you is like, well, what do I do? Like, okay, that's great, but what's the next step? And for you, your paternal line, you actually have 3 pathways moving forward. You could, in Washington, D.C., so Washington, D.C. Embassy actually would be the consulate for you. So then you'd have to look specifically on that consulate, because Washington, D.C.'s requirements are different than New York and different than Miami's, and so on and so forth. So you have to, that's what Eleanor was referring to. but you have to secure an appointment with Washington, D.C. Well, good luck doing that because no one's getting consulate appointments anywhere. So one pathway is the consulates, but they're wholly broken and everyone's having a really hard time getting through just even an appointment. The second pathway is you can sue in Italy saying that I couldn't get an appointment, therefore my civil rights are violated. I'm going to sue in Italy and have an attorney represent your case and have a judge determine your eligibility. But this is where the minor issue that I was telling you about would be a huge red flag if the age did not work out, and we would not recommend that pathway for you. But if we turned out that, for example, your grandfather never naturalized, then the second pathway of litigation is a possibility because you don't have a minor issue. And then there's a third pathway. Oh, and as Eleanor alluded, the judicial system requires different sets of documentation. And then there's the third pathway of changing your residency from Washington, D.C. to Italy and applying directly in Italy. The benefits of doing that is that there's no appointment needed. It's first come, first serve. So that, and also you can be a citizen within 3 to 6 months of applying. So there are 3 major pathways once you find out you are eligible. And so which pathway is a good fit depends on individual choices, but every pathway's documentation requirements are distinctly different. So to save money and sanity, we always tell people to take a moment and review their options through every pathway and really decide what is the best way forward for them.
It doesn't depend. It doesn't matter where you're where the anchor came from in Italy. It doesn't matter the region or anything of that effect. It just, so the law is going to apply no matter where you came, where your parents or grandparents came from.
That is exactly right. Mm-hmm.
And just to re-clarify, you're saying so the court, if you're 10 years old and the anchor became a naturalized citizen, so that's the cutoff. Is the 10-year-old cutoff? Is that what it is? So we have to be
10. The next generation must be 21 years old for it to I apologize, for it not to affect you. Anyone under the age of 21 was considered a minor at the time. And the reinterpretation of the law makes it so if your father was under the age of 21 when your grandfather did naturalize, they say you don't qualify anymore. But only in the court system, not at the consulate level or the Italian. So it becomes really tricky. It's really strategy, right? It's legal strategy.
Yeah, sure.
It's very specific to every person. So just because, oh, I know my friend did it this way, that does not mean you have the same case, right? And so everybody has to review their own kind of family line, figure out what their dates are, maneuvering around these tricky, sticky situations, and figuring out what the pathways are. They both have positives and negatives. Unfortunately, no particular option is an obvious, easy one to choose, right?
Yeah. There's a whole body of law that's really evolved in this instance for specialization purposes. So it's good that it's good that you're all there, and somebody really needs a lawyer to do this. I would think it'd be crazy to do it on your own to try to become a citizen of the 2 countries.
It's it's funny because we do sometimes run into folks who've tackled it themselves, and it's tough because you feel bad for them because they call us and they're like, I've been trying to 7-8 years, and I'm like, I'm sorry, we have to restart again, and they get flustered, and but it's hard. I mean, there's lots of legal maneuvering that has to be done to set you up in the best possible light to lead to an actual citizenship.
Yeah. And you become a citizen of Italy, you can enjoy all the benefits that the Italians enjoy. You can get their medical system, for instance. You can do almost anything that they do, correct?
Yeah, and not only that, you actually have 27 countries that you can live and work in, not just Italy, because it's an EU.
Oh, I see.
It's incredible. It's an EU passport. It's not just an Italian passport. So maybe you want to go to, I don't know, Paris and live. I don't know.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And that's okay too. You can just go to and live and work, and there's like no limitations. And of course, if you have college kids, then they can go enjoy universities for pretty much free, right?
Yeah, right.
There's definitely lots of benefits to it. It gets tricky. It's not impossible. I think we always try to inform even our prospects who do or do not use us. We try to give them as much information. We believe that the best clients are the most informed clients, that the ones that have really looked around, understand their options, and make the right, correct decisions for themselves.
Eleanor, whenever you research somebody's background, you don't have to share me the person's name, of course, but do you ever come up with something where you would say, "Oh, this person was actually not Italian," or anything of that effect, where you actually dug into the records and you found out something about them that made it quite interesting?
It's not ever really that people aren't Italian, but what we do find a lot in almost everybody's documentation are discrepancies. And so discrepancies are something major and something that everybody should be aware of and looking for as they're attaining their documentation. So for instance, we have a lot of issues where we believe that, grandma and grandpa, they were married and had a child, and come to find out that grandma was married prior and had an illegitimate child. So in these cases, we may have to prove paternity. In some routes, you may or may not be able to prove paternity as easy as others. Or let's just say we see a lot of name changes, of course, a lot of Anglo-Saxonization of names, or just because people are coming over on a boat and they're trying to transmit their names verbally and people aren't understanding. Or also something that comes up a lot is, say, baptismal names, where your names are changed, or confirmed names. So or even something that might happen too is sometimes grandma wants to marry grandpa and she just wants to be the same age as him or younger, and so she just randomly changes her name or age or what have you. So these are the things that, as we are gathering our documentation in our process, we look to point out and address immediately. That way we're not wasting any time during the process, and we're addressing them right up front. So they're tackled within an appropriate time frame. So those are kind of the bigger things that we see. But I think a lot of people come to us and say, I'm Italian, I know I qualify 100%. And unfortunately, sometimes even because your parent came from Italy, even if you're first generation, that doesn't necessarily mean that you do qualify and you are entitled. But we do work to educate our people so they know right up front, what their options are.
Now, does it matter, say, if the anchor person had a criminal record or anything like that? Could that affect citizenship?
So that is not something that they look for. They do look for that, let's say, in if you were a spouse and you are not an Italian and you're looking for citizenship via your spouse, they do background checks in every state and country that you live in. So that might be something that might be questionable. But as far as, if you are, mob affiliated and things like that, people have asked us, but Italy doesn't care so much.
Oh, okay. Where's your family from in Italy?
So my family is from Ciprano in Lazio, and so a little outside of Rome, about an hour and a half outside of Rome, and Bani di Luca, so about 30 minutes outside of Lucca in Tuscany.
And your parents, did they immigrate from Italy, or your grandparents?
Great-grandparents.
Great-grandparents.
Yes.
Oh. And Roz, where's your family from in Italy?
Amalfi Coast. And,
okay.
We're also third generation, and we're like what they refer to as fake Italian. Don't have much, we don't know any of the family members that we still have in the Naples area, because it's been so many generations for me. And I, again, as Eleanor did mention, we have folks who call us in their first generation and they get really upset because their parent, became American at 18, and then of course they had children thereafter, and they're like, my father can't even speak English. What do you mean I don't qualify? Right? It's a quirky law, and we're just the messengers of it. That's just how they set it up. It doesn't. It's just how it is.
That's amazing. Well, it sounds like it's an amazing process, and with the changes in the laws. What do you recommend to people nowadays with all these changes coming up? What should they do you think?
I think they need to apply as soon as they can. I think they need to look into and not wait for more changes to come down the line. I mean, the consensus on the ground in Italy is that a language exam is coming. If even if this bill does not pass today, they feel like the Italian folks on the ground believe wholeheartedly that if you are an Italian citizen, you need to understand the minimum of the language. And they get quite frustrated when you are Italian citizen and can't communicate. So they do definitely believe that this language exam will be coming. Now, the language test was recently added for the spouse just a few years back, which was never a requirement before. And so that trend of a language requirement is coming. So we always say, don't wait. We have folks who call us, well, I've been thinking about it for 10 years. I'm like, honey, it would have been easier 10 years ago than it is today. And oh, by the way, today will be easier than 10 years from today, right? So if this is something that people, if is important and is something that, people would like to pursue, we always say, look into it sooner than later.
Fascinating. So many people want to become dual citizens today, and with these changes in the laws, it's quite the fascinating experience for you all. What you have your websites and stuff where people can get in touch with you all if they want to pursue, and you can represent anybody in the United States, correct? It doesn't matter where you don't have to be, Pennsylvania to represent people in Pennsylvania. You can represent everybody, right?
That is correct. Yep.
Well, I'll definitely have links for people to connect with you all about that and about the changes that are coming up and some other things. It's just really kind of interesting that you said that they hate. Well, there's this. They're not really embracing immigrants from maybe the United States and Brazil and other places, but other parts of Europe, it's not that much of a problem. It seems like they seem to be very open to other people.
It's not the Americans, Truby. It's the Brazilians because 30 million Brazilians qualify through this law, and only 10 million Americans qualify through this law. And majority of Americans are not really interested in pursuing a dual citizenship. I know there is an uptick of some level of interest, but the truth is the American passport is a very powerful, sexy passport to hold. And a lot of them are like, why bother? But Brazilians are in a different boat. And so they're always looking to better their situation. And actually, a lot of them pursue the Italian passport to get to the United States, ironically, because Brazilians require a visa to get into the US, but Italians don't. And so, a lot of the Brazilians that are pursuing this law through Italy, their end goal is ironically the US. And not Italy, but Italy's sort of being used as a catalyst as to their next step, because that is what they can do legally. There has been lots of vitriol towards the Brazilians who are trying to do it legally.
How many Brazilians are, do you have a number of how many Brazilians are trying to become citizens of Italy as well?
Yeah, there was that article, Eleanor. Do you remember? We were reading it. Eleanor and I were in February in Italy, and while we were in Italy, there was an article that just came out, and there was a tiny little comune in northern Italy, and they had it was a tiny community of like maybe 7,000 people that lived there, but I think over 12,000 Brazilians had applied through the comune. It was so egregious that the mayor had taken a Brazilian flag and had put it over the mayor's office to be like, I guess we're all Brazilians today. And so right. I mean, but they're illegal and they're doing it legally, right? It's not even they're going through the process illegally, but there is vitriol and they don't like it. And like they were saying that 60% of the lawsuits in Veneto courthouse is for Brazilians trying to become Italians. 60% of their docket. I mean, these are ginormous numbers of folks trying to get through and better their situation. And they're getting fed up with it. Yeah.
You don't hear much about this at all. I mean, you hear about the migration, of course, from Africa and the Middle East and Romania, but Brazil and some other places, that's unique. A lot of people probably aren't aware of this.
Yeah, the African community, that's more refugees and whatnot, right? Yeah. And so they can definitely make it harder for them or make it go through loops or whatever. But when you're using their own laws of, the JF citizenship by blood, they complain about it, right? They complain about it. I mean, the article was mentioning, I mean, 60% of a court's docket to be related to citizenship through Brazil is a shockingly large number.
That is shocking. That's amazing. That's amazing. That's a big development. Yeah.
That's a shocking number. And of course, election year, and they're bringing it up. And ironically, Italy's birth rates are like zero.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they're a very old country, and they need the infusion of, but there's a culture clash of, we like the way it is and we don't like the new influx. And just like any sort of immigration that people feel like their culture is being diluted, that's how they look at it. And and of course, Americans, we're minority in the world of getting this dual citizenship through the JS process in Italy. We are definitely the minority in the whole case. And the majority of the judges are used to seeing documents from Brazil. And in Brazil, it's super easy getting any discrepancies changed. It's not the case in the United States. It's actually illegal to change any vital records of a deceased individual because it's fraud. You can't say my father is Steve Jobs. Like, that's just not going to happen. So they don't touch it. So discrepancies in the US are very difficult to change or impossible. And the judges are used to seeing perfect numbers and perfect documents and perfect everything. So when they see American documentation, which is filled with issues, they throw it out. Right. So it becomes harder to maneuver around because we are the minority. And some of them are like, what do you mean you can't fix it? I'm like, I know you're used to Brazilians, okay, but we're different, right? And it just, yes, US we are the minority. I know it feels like everyone's really interested in it, but compared to a second world country like Brazil, where they don't have amenities and opportunities,
right.
For Americans, it's kind of like, oh my God, it's lovely to have, and I would love to have it, and my heritage and my family and all of that. But for some of the Brazilians, it's like their way out.
Yeah, sure. Which becomes more unstable there when they had this recent election there as well. There was a lot of stuff going on. It's a safe refuge for them to go to Italy. Yeah, so definitely, yeah.
Right. And actually, a lot of them go to Portugal because they speak Portuguese.
That's
so
right.
Yeah. Italian citizenship, and they can live in Portugal. They can do so. It just really opens many, many doors for them.
I think Brazil has the largest Italian population that for their ancestors were from Italy. I think in the whole. Right. Yeah, it's outside Italy. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
And most of them are from northern Italy, which is why those court cases are clogging those northern Veneto regions dockets.
Yeah.
Whereas Americans are mostly from the south and Sicily, and
That's right. Definitely. Well, it's a fascinating conversation. I want to thank you all for being here today, and I'll have links for people to contact you about if they're interested to become dual citizens between Italy and the United States. And it's just the whole the world's becoming a smaller place. I mean, it's just the way it is.
Yeah, it's definitely an evolving law.
It sure is. Yeah.
Immigration is always evolving, not just in Italy, but also in the United States. Every 4 years, our immigration changes for the worse or the better. Whatever it is, it's always changing. But thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure. Great. Yeah.
And it was an absolute pleasure. Eleanor, do you want to?
Thank you so very much, Shruti, for having us on. I think, what we really want to drive home to the Italian community is this really is an incredible opportunity, and we do want to inform people because not only is this something that you can do for yourself, but this is something that can be passed on through generations, which is wonderful.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
As long as you register your children while they are minors, still 18 or younger, you're able to pass it on generation to generation as long as this law exists and holds in the manner that it does. And we just want to invite people to come. And if anybody has any questions, whether it be qualification or which route to go, we would love to talk to them. We do specialize in residency and documentation retrieval. But we're more than happy to kind of help guide people.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Yeah. And with so many the changes now, and you're probably going to have changes in the future. And so now's the time to really get on it. Yeah. Fascinating. Well, thank you very much, ladies, for being with me today. And it's a fascinating conversation. Maybe we could talk again sometime.
Thank you so much
Thank you.
for having
Thank you,
us.
Truby.
Thank you.
You bet.
Bye.
Bye-bye.